The scar on my ribs wasn't mine, but the blood on my hands was. My face in the mirror was mine and not mine. Same brown eyes, same unremarkable mouth. But the cheekbones seemed sharper, the brows angled differently.
Miss Finch, you're awake.
A man's voice. Not warm, not cold, the temperature of a waiting room. Where am I?
You're home, the Colleone estate, upstate New York.
That's not my home.
It is now.
Who are you?
You can call me the consultant. You've been in recovery for 4 days. The body modifications are healing well.
Modifications?
The scar on your ribs matches one sustained by Caterina Colleone at age 19. The tattoo was completed yesterday. You should be fully mobile within the week.
I'm a librarian. I fix books.
You were a librarian. Now you're Caterina Colleone.
I don't...
Your grandmother, Margaret Finch, Sunset Park Care, room 4117. She had breakfast this morning, oatmeal. She told the nurse she was looking forward to your visit on Saturday.
My stomach dropped through the floor.
Whether that continues depends entirely on you.
The bathroom door rattled. 3 knocks. Short, hard, not a request.
That will be Luca Ross, family underboss. He's been waiting for you to wake up. Don't keep him waiting.
Miss Colleone, you've been in there a long time.
I opened the door. He didn't look like a wolf. He looked like an accountant who'd learned to kill with his hands, and then forgotten to stop dressing like one. Dark suit, white shirt, no tie. He stood in the doorway and studied me the way I'd once watched a conservator examine a questionable veneer, looking not at the surface, but for the seams.
You've lost weight.
I was in recovery.
Recovery? From what, exactly?
I don't remember.
That's convenient.
He turned and walked down the hallway, not looking back, expecting me to follow. I followed. The dining room was the size of my entire apartment. A table that could seat 20 held only 2 place settings. He sat at the head. I sat where he pointed. A man in a dark vest poured coffee.
Marco will be driving you today. He drove you for 6 years. Do you remember him?
I'm still piecing things together.
Of course.
He picked up his fork.
Do you remember the night in Palermo? The rain. You hate rain. You said it makes you feel like the sky is falling on you personally. Do you remember saying that?
I didn't know if she'd ever been to Palermo. I didn't know anything. I opened my mouth. He stood up. He walked around the table. Slowly, the way you'd approach a cornered animal. He stopped beside my chair. His hand came up. 2 fingers under my chin, tilting my face toward the light.
Caterina never flinched. We'll talk again. Soon.
I sat there. The coffee steamed and cooled. Marco appeared in the doorway, holding car keys, looking at me with a confusion he was trying very hard to hide.
Miss? The car is ready.
I stood up. My legs held.
You look different, miss.
I was in an accident.
I know.
I don't remember much.
I know. The doctor said you might not.
The Greco situation is escalating. They hit our shipment at the docks last night. We lost 2 men.
Sal, The shipment was insured. The loss is financial, not strategic. We respond by tightening supply, not escalating violence. That's what she would say.
The meeting continued around me. Territory, numbers, names I didn't recognize. Afterward, I found my way back to the bedroom. The tablet woke me. At 3 a.m, I'd fallen asleep in the chair by the window, still wearing Caterina's clothes. The silk blouser had wrinkled against my skin. My neck ached from the angle of my head against the wingback. The screen glowed on the nightstand. Encrypted call. The consultant's voice came through. Before I could speak.
Dosage reduced by 20%. We'll monitor for 2 weeks. If she declines, we accelerate the transition.
And if the family asks questions?
They won't. I control the medical reports.
Understood.
Then the consultant's voice again. Closer to the microphone.
Miss Finch, I know you're listening.
The call ended. I sat there. The room was dark, except for the tablet's dying glow. I stood up and walked to the vanity. Caterina's silver brush laid beside a tray of perfume bottles. Strands of dark hair were still tangled in the bristles. Her hair, from before, to brush it. The next morning, I started watching. Not like before. I found the first one in Caterina's study. It was a room off the main hallway, smaller than the others, lined with leather-bound books that looked like they'd never been opened. But the desk drawers were locked, and the lock was old, brass, loose.
Miss? I've been looking for you.
I know. I stood up, the journal still in my hand. I need to learn who I'm supposed to be.
You already seem different.
Good. Luca found me in the garden that afternoon. I'd been walking the gravel paths, trying to memorize the layout of the estate. The bare maples, the frozen fountain, the stone wall that marked the property line. Every detail was a potential exit or a dead end.
Palmarda,
What about it?
do you remember the rain?
It wasn't raining.
No, it wasn't.
You asked me that before, at breakfast.
I did.
Why?
To see what you'd say.
I held his gaze. And?
She's different. I know. Is that bad?
A long pause.
I haven't decided yet.
The footsteps separated. One set toward the east wing, one set fading down the stairs. I sat on the edge of my bed and unfolded the journal page. He doesn't know I know. Neither do you, I thought. But I'm learning. I locked the bathroom door. I turned on the faucet. Cold water. I wet a washcloth and pressed it to my face. I thought about my grandmother, her room at Sunset Park, the window that faced the garden. She always said the roses there reminded her of the ones my grandfather grew. I opened the door. Luca was sitting in the armchair across from my bed. The lamp was on low. I'm fine.
You keep saying that.
Because it keeps being true. He didn't move. His hands rested on the arms of the chair, fingers loose. A man who knew how to wait, how to watch.
Caterina never had to say it. I'll stay. In case you're not fine.
It wasn't kindness. I knew that. Kindness didn't measure you. But his voice was different. Like something in it had worn through. The dinner invitation came 3 days later. A family meal, Marco called it. All the capos. Their wives, the inner circle. Attendance was not optional. I wore a black dress I found in Caterina's closet. It fit like it had been made for someone else's body and altered to fool the eye, which it had. The dining room blazed with candlelight, 20 people around the long table. Sal sat to my left, Luca to my right, the other faces blurred into a wall of expensive shoots and guarded expressions. Halfway through the second course, Sal set down his fork.
The Greco shipment. Numbers don't add up. Someone's skimming.
The table went quiet.
We've been through this. We've been through your version. I want to hear hers.
Page 47.
That ledger's been audited twice.
Check it again.
What's on page 47?
Nothing. Yet. The table stirred.
Someone laughed nervously.
After dinner, he cornered me in the hallway outside the kitchen. The staff had disappeared. We were alone.
I don't know who you are, but I know you're not her.
Then why haven't you killed me? He didn't answer. The silence stretched. His jaw tightened. His hands stayed at his sides, but I saw the effort it took to keep them there. I pushed off the wall and walked past him. Our shoulders didn't touch.
Your grandmother had a fall.
The old Elara would have begged, would have promised anything, would have crumbled. But the old Elara had died in a bathroom 3 nights ago, washcloth pressed to her face, counting to 3. You need me breathing. You kill her, you lose your leverage. And then I have nothing left to lose. Do the math. It was the first time I'd seen him without a response ready.
Who taught you to talk like that?
You did. When you made me her. I ended the call. My hands were shaking. I pressed them against my thighs until they stopped.
Marco appeared in the doorway. He must have heard something. The tablet's glow, my voice, the silence after. Miss, is everything...
No. But it will be. I walked to the closet and pulled out the ledger I'd taken from the study that morning. I opened it to page 47. Blank. I held the candle to page 47. The flame licked the edge of the paper. Heat bloomed outward in a slow circle. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the words began to rise, brown against cream, like old blood seeping through a bandage. The family meeting was in progress. 20 people around the long table. Sal was mid-sentence about territory disputes. When I walked in, the ledger open in my hands. I set it down in the center of the table. Read it aloud, Luca. He looked at me, then at the page. His face didn't change, but something behind his eyes went very still.
Reduced dosage, confirmed death, transition asset.
The room went silent.
That's murder.
Yes. And he made me the weapon.
This is absurd. She's fabricated...
Say it again. The thing you said when you thought no one was listening. Go ahead. We'll wait. He opened his mouth, closed it. Luca stood. 2 men in dark suits moved to block the doors. The consultant's composure cracked. Just a hair. Just enough.
You have no idea what you've done.
I picked up the ledger and held it over the candle flame. The edges curled, the words darkened. My name is Elara. Luca found me in Caterina's study. I was packing. Not much. The clothes I'd arrived in, which Marco had kept folded in a drawer. A book I'd taken from the library downstairs. The folded journal page from the boathouse. He stood in the doorway and watched me zip the bag.
Elora, I was trying to protect the family.
I know.
I didn't know what he was doing. I didn't know you were...
His hands were empty. His face was different. Stripped of the calm, the control, the wolf's patience.
Please. I made a mistake. One mistake.
I picked up my bag, sling it over my shoulder, looked at him. You called me Little Mouse. You were right. I was scared all the time. Every time you walked into a room, every time you looked at me, I couldn't breathe.
I know.
And then I stopped.
Stopped what?
Being scared. Being her. I walked toward the door. He didn't move to block me. Being yours. His hand came up, not to grab, just hovering. Like he wanted to touch my arm and knew he'd lost the right.
What do you want me to do?
I walked down the hallway, through the front door. Marco was waiting with the car, engine running. He opened the back door for me. I got in. The gates opened. The gravel road stretched toward the highway. I didn't look back.
They put the consultant in a room without windows. That's what Marco told me weeks later when he called to say Caterina had woken up.
She was weak but aware. She'd asked about the woman who'd worn her face. I was back in the library by then. My library. The smell of old paper and methyl selenite. The warm hum of the climate control system. My gloves. My tools. My quiet. In the envelope Marco sent me, along with Caterina's thanks and a deed to a cottage I'd probably never visit, there was a single item retrieved from the consultant's cell. A yellow library slip, the kind I used to mark pages for repair. On it, in pencil, in my handwriting, knowledge over violence, always.
He'd kept it. Marco said he'd found it folded in the consultant's pocket, worn soft from handling.
Some things don't need to be framed. They just need to be finished.
Marco called on a Thursday. I was at my workstation, a 16th century book of hours open before me, gold leaf clinging to my gloves. The phone buzzed against the table. I let it go to voicemail.
It buzzed again.
Miss Finch, she's awake. Caterina.
She wants to thank you. I told her you might not want, she said to give you something anyway. Check your mail.
Thank you for keeping my chair warm. And for not letting it burn. I put the letter in my desk drawer next to the yellow library slip. That Thursday, I worked late, restoring the spine of a water-damaged Fieslet. When I finally locked up and stepped outside, the street was quiet. A dark sedan sat parked across from the library entrance, engine off, windows tinted. I walked to the subway, bought a tea from the cart on the corner, went home.
He sits there for 2 hours. Every week. Doesn't go in. Just watches the window.
I was quiet for a moment. I know.
You do?
I don't look. But I know. Spring came. The library's rare book wing reopened with little fanfare. A notice in the newsletter. A few researchers trickling back. I spent my days with my hands in old paper, and my mind on nothing but the work. It was exactly what I'd wanted, exactly what I'd fought to get back. One afternoon, my coworker Keisha leaned over my workstation. You were gone for a while.
Family emergency.
Everything okay now? Yeah. I was cleaning out my work bag and found a folded page I didn't recognize. Cream-colored paper. Handwritten.
I unfolded it and read, August 14, the boathouse.
He doesn't know I know.
The page from Caterina's journal.
I'd forgotten I'd kept it. I sat on my couch and held it for a long time. The secret it referred to, whatever had happened at that boathouse, whatever Luca didn't know, wasn't mine to uncover.
It belonged to a life I'd borrowed and returned. The next morning, I took the page to work. I didn't file it in the rare book archive.
I didn't frame it, or burn it, or bury it. I put it in a standard archival folder. Let it become history, not mine. Just history. Some things you keep, some things you archive. The difference is whether they still have power over you. This one didn't. Not anymore. Marco came to the library on a Tuesday.
Miss Finch.
Marco. What are you doing here? He handed me a book, a rare edition of the Aeneid, 17th century, leather-bound.
She said you'd know what to do with this. It was in the family library. She thought it belonged here. There's something else.
Marco reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope.
She wanted you to have this.
I opened the envelope. Inside, a check. More money than I'd make in 5 years at the library. And a short note in the same handwriting as before.
Quieter. Reads a lot. She would have liked you. The real one, I mean. Before. He still sits outside. Every Thursday.
I know. Marco nodded slowly. He understood. Or he was trying to.
He asked me once what your name was.
Did he?
No, he just sat there, looking at the window.
The curb was empty. It was Tuesday. Not Thursday. Evening. I locked the library at 6. The spring air was soft, carrying the smell of exhausted and pretzel carts, and the first green things pushing up through the city's cracks. I walked home, the route I'd walked 1,000 times before, past the diner with the flickering sign, past the bogea where the cat slept in the window, past the brownstone with the peeling paint and the overgrown window boxes. I didn't look for the dark sedan. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, unlocked the door, dropped my keys in the bowl by the entrance, filled the hitch and set it to boil. The tea was chamomile. The book I'd been reading, a worn paperback, nothing rare, nothing precious. Opened it to the dog-etched page. Started reading. Outside, an engine turned over. A car I hadn't looked for, pulled away from a curb I hadn't checked. The sound faded down the street, swallowed by the city's endless noise. I didn't look up. The tea steamed. The pages turned. The evening settled into the room, like it belonged there. And for the first time in a year, Elara Finch was exactly where she wanted to be.